Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. This is our super special Super Bowl preview show. We have the full crew back, me, Sam Monson, Steve Palazzolo. And let's get right into it. We're going to break down every single sort of unit matchup in this game, go through all of them. So we'll start with when the Patriots have the ball. My favorite matchup of the entire Super Bowl, Patriots offensive line going up against the Eagles defensive line. The matchup that may decide this Super Bowl, if we're being honest. Steve, how do you see this one playing out?
Well, let's start with the pressure number, Mike. We got the handy pressure number that we're passing around here.
Very big
at
one.
PFF
Yes.
this week. Give me who wants to give the number?
Which one?
The Brady, how many pressured in the Super Bowl during his losses?
Yeah. So if it's above 43% pressure, the two losses Brady's had in the Super Bowl, the Giants got pressure on him more than 43% of the time. Generally, that we've talked before about Russell Wilson and other players. If you're over 40%, you're in a pretty good place. If you're over 45, you're definitely screwing up the quarterback some way, shape, or form. And the Eagles this year have averaged pressure on 41% of their passing plays, which leads the league. They've been even higher in the postseasons, 44.9. And I think most crucially of all, when they don't blitz, they've had pressure at 38% of the time, which again leads the league. The Eagles, I think, are uniquely qualified amongst teams in this NFL to get pressure on Brady without blitzing.
And that was without blitzing was the key thing there. In those two Super Bowls, the Giants only blitzed 19 times total. That's on 20.5% of Brady's dropbacks in the Super Bowls. The Giants blitz. Eagles this season have only blitzed 22% of the time. So the numbers are eerily similar in terms of pressure blitz rate to those Giants teams. This is the Giants reincarnated.
Yeah, the Eagles are equipped to, slow down the Patriots offense like few other defenses are. And then when you look at who they have up front of the defensive line, we always talk about the biggest stars. Brandon Graham, second straight elite PFF grade if you guys have edge and you have your player grades. And, of course, Fletcher Cox, the number 2 graded interior defensive lineman. But beyond those two, there's 7 deep. They roll 7 deep on that defensive line. 7 guys have at least 20-plus pressures. If you guys have been watching NFL Network, you'll see them quoting that PFF stat quite a bit this entire couple weeks leading up to the game. So it's going to be that front four. Brandon Graham going up against the Patriots. Right tackles, whether it's Adrian Waddle or Cameron Fleming. Fletcher Cox going to do most of his work against right guard Shaq Mason. Sometimes could go face Joe Thuney. I got a good stat for that in a little bit as well. But those are the matchups. It's all up front for that Philly defensive line.
And that 40% number is interesting. Again, if you look at the Atlanta Super Bowl last year, at the point where they were 28-3 up, they had got pressure on Brady at 44% of the time.
Yeah.
And in the second half, from that point on, they just barely got any pressure at all. That entire defense ran out of gas, chiefly because they relied on 1 or 2 guys to get all of their pressure, as opposed to this Eagles defense, like you just said, is 7 deep. They shouldn't reach a situation like the Falcons did, where they just run out of gas and the guys they rely on for pressure can't get it done anymore because they have such a strong rotation. They should be able to go all game long, even if it goes 99 snaps like it did a year ago, and still be pressuring Brady at the end of it.
I do think there's something to New England, perhaps, though, running no huddle, running hurry up, just to keep guys on the field for maybe 6 or 7 straight snaps at a time. But I think your point is taken. They're rolling 7 deep, and they, over time, they're not necessarily going to wear down like the Falcons did.
Yeah, and I would say every single guy that they throw out there of that 7 deep is a plus. They are favored in their matchup against the opposing offensive lineman they're going to go against. I just think that is huge considering. That's why they're the number 1 pressure rate in the NFL in terms of, and still haven't blitzed that often, is because of that every week in and week out. I'm going to be watching, though, that Brandon Graham matchup because supposedly Adrian Waddle, they're thinking about starting him even coming back from injury here. Last time we saw him in the divisional round against the Titans, he was an issue. He gave up 5 total pressures. He did not play well. Cameron Fleming, though, last week held up fairly well against the Jaguars. Now they gave him a good deal of help in terms of running back chips and whatnot, but I think they'd be crazy to go back to Waddle after what we've seen from Fleming here, especially with an injury going up against Brandon Graham. He's just going to collapse that pocket every time.
Yeah, Fleming's he hasn't had a great career, but this season he's been excellent, and he's played the last 3.5 games, only given up 4 total pressures, and that's the only half game that he didn't play was when Waddle did start the first half against Tennessee before going down again due to injury. Fleming has been the better player down the stretch here for New England. I mentioned that Fletcher Cox stat. Now he lines up most of the time, right, over right guard Shaq Mason. But if he goes and they flip him, and especially in nickel situations, it's easy to kind of dictate where you want the matchup to be. If they put Fletcher Cox over Joe Thuney, the left guard, Thuney has given up, out of his pressures, 60% of them have been bull rushes. So most guards give up about 25% of their pressures come on bull rush. Thuney is that guy that's like, tough to beat inside, tough to beat outside, but you can beat him with power. So 60% of his pressures have come via the bull rush. And then Fletcher Cox, 40% of his pressures have come via the bull rush, another number that's normally in that 20 to 25% range for an interior lineman like him. This could be something where the Eagles just say, look, go play with some power against Thuney. And on bull rushes, the thing is you don't get a ton of sacks when you're bull rushing, but you compress the pocket. Brady can't step up, and then all you need is one other guy to win. If Brandon Graham wins and you have a guard in your face and you have another win coming from right tackle, that's when you have the success, when you have multiple wins. So it could be a viable strategy for Philly to just say, hey, go push the pocket every single down against Joe Thuney because you could beat him with power.
This definitely, to me, is the matchup of the game because I think this is why the Patriots ended up winning against the Jaguars in the conference championship because, again, we thought the Jaguars would have an advantage with their defensive line going up against the Patriots, and it didn't turn out that way. Didn't even get pressure on a quarter of the snaps against Brady. I think this is the one where if that happens again, if they're only getting pressure on a quarter of the snaps, I don't think they have a chance in this game. They have to do what they did to Minnesota, what they did to Atlanta, and consistently pressure the quarterback to win this game.
No, that is the key to this game is there is a legitimate blueprint to slowing down Tom Brady and the Patriots. The problem is that there's only ever one team a year, maybe, that is even equipped to do it. You have to get a huge amount of pressure, 40% plus. You have to do it without blitzing because traditionally in his career, Tom Brady has carved up the blitz like no other quarterback. And you've got to at least be viable on the back end off the back of that as well. The problem is most teams just aren't capable of getting that level of pressure without blitzing, so you're in this catch-22 situation of just not being able to slow them down without doing the one thing that neutralizes the pressure you're able to bring on them. The Eagles are that team this year, though, like the Giants, both those Super Bowl years, that are capable of getting that level of pressure, and that's this game, at least on that side of the ball.
I want to see what they do on the back end, though. I went back and watched a little bit of Brady against Jim Schwartz. The last time they played each other was 2014 when Schwartz was with the Bills. And, Schwartz plays a Rolodex of coverages, so to speak. It's not just like when it was Jacksonville, it's like, hey, these guys are playing cover 1 and cover 3 and a couple other coverages here and there. But you pretty much know what you're getting. With Schwartz, it's zone, it's man, it's cover 1 man, it's cover 2 man, cover 2 zone, 4 and 6. They play everything. And when that happens, first off, a lot of times it's tough to communicate. Mm-hmm. One of the advantages and the reasons why Seattle has been so good through the years is they play this cover 1, cover 3 system, and they see every formation through the eyes of that defensive coverage, so they know how to adjust to every formation. When you're playing different coverages all the time, formations are difficult to match up to sometimes. So in that game against Buffalo, you could see the Patriots shift and move, use motion as much as any team in the league. You could see some communication issues, guys being left open, the defenders being really late to adjust. I want to see if Schwartz sticks with what he normally does, which is mix it up. And if he mixes it up, New England, I think, has the advantage to kind of create their own matchups and dictate matchups. Or do they go and play man coverage, which if there's been any way to slow down Brady this particular season, because he doesn't have Julian Edelman for that quick hitter, it's been against man coverage. So do they play man with that 4-man rush that potentially could put a lot of pressure on Brady? I think that is ultimately the way that they should be going and the way I thought Jacksonville was going to go.
I do think they have, moving on to the wide receiver DB matchup, these sort of pieces to play man coverage. I think if you talk about 1-versus-1 matchups, you have Ronald Darby, who can match the speed of Brandon Cooks, Jalen Smith, who has the physicality to go up against someone like Chris Hogan. You have Jalen Mills.
Mills, yeah.
Notre Dame folks here. Patrick Robinson to go up against Danny Amendola, one of the best slot corners in the league this season. And then Malcolm Jenkins can come into the box and guard Rob Gronkowski if need be. So I think from that perspective, they could play man coverage. But like you said, I'm not sure they're necessarily going to. The one thing I want to see, though, is definitely don't get Jalen Mills matched up on Brandon Cooks. Because we just saw last week against the Jaguars that Bill Belichick is willing to keep Brandon Cooks against his favorable matchup. So Brandon Cooks played exclusively on the left side against the Jaguars, only a handful of snaps on the right side, usually plays about almost 50-50 this season. And Jalen Mills has this year played exclusively on the left side. So left side of the defense. So if they put Brandon Cooks on the right side the whole time and keep Jalen Mills there, that's just a huge mismatch from a speed perspective. Jalen Mills ran a 4.6 at the combine. Brandon Cooks a 4.33 guy. Like, that's just such a big mismatch that I think they have only done it a couple times this season in terms of tracking wide receivers. I think you have to do it with Darby in this one.
Yeah, and the thing with Cooks, too, he struggled against those not only faster corners, but the physical press corners, and even a couple snaps against Jacksonville where he may have induced a defensive pass interference that wasn't really there. You can out-physical him, if you play press, but when you're playing off coverage, so it still comes back to, like, what's Schwartz going to do? Is he going to play cover 3 and cover 4 sometimes? That's when, the Patriots can use him a little bit because, Cook's speed plays best when he can run those comebacks and, have that free release. So it's not only who, but how, because I think you could take Cooks out of the game if you do put a Darby on him and play him up in his face.
The numbers this year back up what you're saying, Mike. If you look at the guys that have gotten the touchdowns against Jalen Mills, it's a lot of speed receivers. It's Sammy Watkins. It's Odell Beckham twice. It's John Brown from the Cardinals. The fast guys are the guys that have gotten the scores against Jalen Mills. So, yeah, I think that's absolutely true. That would be a bad matchup for the Eagles if they allow that to happen.
Going back to Schwartz again, though, too, from a schematic standpoint, if he plays the way he did in Buffalo with some cover 4, cover 4 means you can essentially you get man across the board. You can get some cornerbacks, some wide receivers lined up on safeties deep down the field. You can create some big play opportunities. I think there will be a few of those, particularly to Cook's deep post opportunities where he's got leverage on a corner, whether it is Mills, whether it is Darby. I think for the Patriots, the way they attacked Schwartz last time, there were some deep post opportunities. There were some underneath crossing route opportunities. And I think that's what we're going to see, a couple deep shots where Cooks is involved in the game, especially if he does get that free release.
And don't underestimate the possibility of trick plays. Patriots offense.
Oh, they always have something.
It's going to they're going to run one, right?
So even in that crazy comeback last year in the 28-3 game, I think people forget because they did pull it off. There was a terrible failed Amendola double pass or something that just
I forgot it.
It was at a terrible time, and it just didn't work. And of course, last week they had the pass or 2 weeks ago, that pass that did work to Deion Lewis, but eventually ended up in a fumble. The Patriots always have something dialed up. Especially they've got the most unique flea flicker plays, outside zone flea flickers, and the one that they ran against Jacksonville. So they'll have a few of those in the bag.
I think, broadly speaking, the idea of both these coaching staffs, their impact on this game is one of the more underrated sort of threads of this. Everyone talks about, what Bill Belichick does to teams with 2 weeks to prepare. And, he'll be able to scheme whatever side he's facing, and that's how he wins all these games. I think what the Eagles are able to do with 2 weeks to prepare is the underrated side of that storyline that nobody's really talking about. They went in, they played the Minnesota Vikings, a team that had been historically great on third down, a team that had the number one defense in the league, and they made them look like they had no idea what they were doing on defense schematically. They completely outcoached the Vikings in the NFC Championship game with 1 week to prepare. I think you give this Eagles coaching staff 2 weeks to prepare as well, and that's a real battle of a clash of titans between the Patriots and Eagles coaching staffs, not just the Belichick side.
Yeah, if you're not a fan of either team and you're not distracted by the commercials and you're not too drunk or whatever, just enjoy, I think, the cat and mouse game on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
Because, plus you've got the Eagles offense, which we'll get into, and we'll talk about the RPO stuff and all the things that they do offensively.
Yes.
But the New England defense has also done a fantastic job of just adjusting as games go on, and we saw that against Jacksonville. They cracked down in the fourth quarter. There's a lot of great coaching matchups here.
Do we see the run game for the Patriots being any sort of factor in this? Just because that does not seem like a great matchup for them. like against that Eagles defensive line. It just doesn't seem like. Do we see it being?
I don't think it will be.
Yeah,
I
didn't think so. Like,
if you look at them historically too, when they go up against a great defensive line, even if it's a defensive line that's built more on pass rushing than stopping the run, they are perfectly fine with saying, "Tom, get in the gun. We'll spread it out. We'll do a few extra screens here and there, and just essentially giving up on the run game." And even against Jacksonville, they ran the ball a little bit, but it was pretty much a Brady short pass. We're going to trust Brady to make 50 good decisions rather than throwing away a few running plays.
Yeah, and I remember the last few years against the Jets when there was actually that D-line was intact and everyone playing at their highest level, they would just sort of skirt around the D-line by running a bunch of wide toss plays just to like get it away from Muhammad Wilkerson, big snacks. Just don't even give those guys a chance to make plays versus the run. So yeah, I don't see the run being a huge factor. I do think it'll be definitely in Brady's hands down the stretch. But let's flip over to when the Eagles have the ball. And you mentioned it, Steve, the RPOs. You're going to get sick of hearing Chris say it on Sunday, but it's going to happen a lot because the Eagles ran more this year than any other team in the NFL. They gained more yards than any team in the NFL, and it was not even close. They run it, 10 or so times a game. What are the Patriots going to do to shut it down?
Is that
or do they even need to shut it down? Do you even have to worry? Is
that a prop bet?
How many times Chris says RPO?
How many times they say RPO? I mean, Mike, you wrote a good article on it this week, ProFootballFocus.com, and you had the answer. I'll let you answer the question. How is New England going to slow down the old run-pass option? Explain to our listeners, too, what the run-pass option really is.
So, run-pass option is, as it sounds, the quarterback can hand it off to the running back or pull it, throw. A lot of times it's like a short screen, slant, sometimes a go route, but usually he's reading at least one defender or the coverage on the play to make the decision of whether to hand it off or to throw it. We saw last week in the first half of the Jaguars game, Jaguars ran the exact same run-pass option 4 times in that first half. Averaged over 10 yards per play on it. It was they had trips to one side, and they could either throw a quick shovel screen or hand it off on a wide run the other way. And the Patriots just had no clue what they were looking at. They were playing a lot of zone coverage in that first half. They didn't have a guy to handle both the pass and the run. There was one play where they handed it off and Landon Roberts was sprinting at the screen after they had hit him with the screen a couple of times. So they didn't know what they were doing to defend it. But I think the Patriots are still well suited to shut them down because the best way to shut down run pass options is to play man coverage. The completion percentage against man coverage versus zone coverage is 88% versus zone, 68% versus man on run pass options, 5 yards per attempt versus man, 5.8 versus zone. You want to play man coverage. It also forces the handoff a lot of the times, which is good because handoffs only gain 4.5 yards per play on run pass options. The pass gains 5.1. So I do think you'll see a heavy dose of man coverage from the Patriots in this one, and I don't see the run pass option leading to a ton of explosive plays. Now, it might lead to some first downs, but I don't think it's going to be as effective as it maybe has been for the Eagles throughout the season.
I think press coverage is big as well. Like when you looked at what the RPOs did against the Vikings, a lot of the times they were optioning off Harrison Smith, and the Vikings weren't playing press coverage. They were backing off in their off-man or cover 4 stuff, and they basically just allowed the Eagles to take a look at it, read what the defense was doing, and pick up free yardage, take the free 5 yards that the slant was giving them because nobody was up in press. If you're going to press that guy at the line of scrimmage, it immediately makes that a much tougher decision. If you want to go to the pass, you're going to have to rely on this guy beating press coverage at the line to get open. You can't just take a look at it and take free yards. You actually require Nick Foles to be accurate, to make the good decisions, and to do his part as opposed to just having a look up and taking yardage that the RPO is already schemed open for you.
Yeah, the key here is this isn't like the game changer, because at some point Foles, there's going to be a 3rd and 7, right? Yeah. There's going to be a 3rd and 8, and Foles has to make a big throw in the pocket, and he did all of that against Minnesota. But the RPOs are the thing that I think, I kept tweeting out that the Jaguars executed their game plan to perfection through about 3 quarters plus, which was they used every second on the play clock. They ran the ball. On 2nd and 7, they would throw a 2-yard pass that turned into an 8-yard gain to sustain drives. The RPOs are part of that whole deal to create 10, 12, 15-play drives. And even though the Jaguars were successful with it and eventually lost, and even the Steelers were successful with it and eventually lost in Week 15 where they were controlling the clock. I mean, that's still part of this whole blueprint in beating New England. Keep Brady, keep the offense off the field, and the RPOs are a part of that whole deal.
Yeah, they're realistically a way of boosting the production of the quarterback in particular, which is why all the way through the season, I think the coaching job that this team has done has really been underrated. We were saying it all the way through Carson Wentz's fantastic year that, this coaching staff was putting him in an amazing position to succeed. Now, he was executing that game plan amazingly and, deserved all the plaudits, but it was why when he went down, we were saying, well, they may not be done. Nick Foles has shown in the past that if you scheme some stuff for him, he's capable of making those kind of plays and executing the simple stuff. And that's what he's been doing. When he's been playing well, he's been taking all those RPOs and making those kind of plays. And they're able to kind of, you get whatever Nick Foles' baseline is, which can be all over the map. The RPOs and that kind of stuff, we're able to just boost that production by whatever the percentage is. They give you an extra kind of bunch of free yardage that you don't get if you're not going to run them.
Yeah, it's a great way to, one, keep an offense on schedule, and two, keep a quarterback in rhythm. You hear quarterbacks talk about so much how getting in a rhythm and completing, some easy passes just psychologically helps you as a passer, and then completing the big ones down the field. And I think that's also huge for Foles because it seems like when he has a good game, he has a good game from the start. When he has a bad game, it's a few throws go wrong at the beginning, and then it steeps downhill from there. There's no first and second half Foles. It's either you get one or the other.
Yeah, Chris talked about that a lot in the Super Bowl meeting that we had for him. He thinks that Foles is absolutely this guy that gets in a rhythm early. And if you're going to get the good Nick Foles, he gets into this groove almost immediately in the game and then just rolls with that momentum all the way through.
See, that's where I think it could be such a great matchup. New England, their season was kind of a microcosm of how they play. Their season started out horribly. They were giving up 30-plus points per game, and then they figured it out and they made adjustments. There's a lot of individual games that play out just like that where teams are moving the ball on them. They're moving the ball on them. They kind of crack down in the red zone. And by the end of the game, it's like, man, the Patriots defense really looked like they gave up a ton, but they only gave up 17 points, or they only gave up 20 points, or whatever it is. So even if Foles does get into a good rhythm, then it's going to be like, all right, can he elevate his game as the game goes on, like he did against Minnesota, or will Matt Patricia in that defense, finally make an adjustment? But there are some interesting matchups for New England's man coverage on the back end. I feel like the same way you talk about the Eagles, they might be equipped to slow down the Patriots receivers. I think New England has the right pieces to slow down the Eagles' weapons as well.
Yeah, that wide receiver versus DB matchup is going to be very interesting because I think the Eagles, like you said, the Patriots are very well suited to shut them down. Ever since Week 10, they've had their cornerbacks track opposing wide receivers. And they basically put Gilmore on the larger, more physical wide receiver, Butler on the quicker, shifter wide receiver. So I fully expect Gilmore to be guarding Alshon Jeffrey. Fully expect Butler to be either Torrey Smith or Nelson Aguilar, whichever one probably lines up out wide on a given play, and that seems like a good matchup for the Patriots on both ends because Jeffrey's not much of a separation guy. And, yeah,
Patrick Chung too against Zach Ertz. I'm not saying that's an advantage for New England, but Chung does a pretty good job against tight ends. That's kind of his role, but I think Ertz has that size and frame that could catch a few passes against Chung.
I think Aguilar there is the guy that has the potential to cause problems that the New England Patriots can't match up with as well. He has been completely reborn this year, moving into the slot. His yards per route run figure was 0.69 in the first 2 years, which is basically the worst figure in the entire league. And it was the same number both those 2 years. Then it more than doubled this year when they moved him into the slot. He's been in the slot 86% of the time, something like that, I think, which is among the top 5 percentages in the entire league. And his production is more than double, and he has the athleticism inside that a lot of slot corners can't live with. He's got legitimate speed. He's got quickness. He has open field running skills as well if you just get the ball in his hands in shallow crossers, that kind of thing. That's the guy I think that the Patriots don't match up with particularly well, and he has been productive even with Carson Wentz down. Yeah,
that's the thing. It's going to be Eric Rowe most likely against Nelson Aguilar if you are playing those matchups. If you take that to its a logical conclusion, which is advantage Eagles, I think, is the biggest advantage for the Eagles. Because Rowe, while if he can get up and press him, but Nelson Aguilar lines up off the line of scrimmage, you can't press him as well. I think then his shiftiness is going to be a big issue for Rowe. I'm not sure if Nelson Aguilar goes off for 150, that all of a sudden beats you. But I do think that that's the one area they could exploit.
And that's exactly the logic. That's exactly why moving him to the slot has been so successful, because they can now line him up a yard off the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
He isn't going to get pressed out of the game, and that's why he was so bad those first 2 years, because he just got physically dominated by outside corners.
I saw him get pressed out of the slot on the line of scrimmage by Captain Munnerlyn, just completely taken out of play. 5'9", like 180, Captain Munnerlyn owned him. So, yeah, you don't want him lining up on the line of scrimmage, Nelson Aguilar. But
if you can get him away from being physically controlled at the line of scrimmage on release, he's very good. And putting him in the slot allows you to do that.
One other little thing to keep an eye on, Zach Ertz, even though he hasn't caught a touchdown since Week 15, with that size that he has, Belichick's known for just let's take away the one guy. I want to see red zone. The Eagles have a lot of different weapons there. They have Alshon Jeffrey. They've got different guys. But does Belichick treat Zach Ertz like he's Gronk and almost put just two guys on him, because he's still their best red zone weapon as far as the size? They run that little out to him. He uses his body really well. I want to see that matchup as well, because the Eagles, you got a creative offense against a very good red zone defense that could determine that side of the ball.
Not just that, but they've now got that out and up on tape. So they run that little out to Zach Ertz all day. Harrison Smith saw that.
Moves like crazy in that game.
Harrison Smith saw that coming, bid on it, and Ertz was 10 yards behind him, wide open. So you've now got multiple things you need to worry about with Zach Ertz.
Let's get on to the last matchup that I want to hit on. I think this is, in my opinion, the second biggest matchup. I think there's two matchups that the Eagles have to win to have a chance of winning this game. One is their Eagles defensive line getting pressure on Tom Brady. The other is Eagles offensive line just manhandling the Patriots defensive line in the run game. I think they have to be consistently running the football, 4+ yards a pop, and force the Patriots' hand into adding extra guys in the box, doing things to try to stop the run. I think that's the other matchup they have to win to have any chance, because that'll keep them, like I said, on schedule, and it'll take the pressure off Nick Foles to try to win them this game. And I think there's a chance they can get it done.
I think New England's better equipped now to handle that, and making.
They had their issues at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, beginning of the, like if this was
Chiefs
the beginning
game,
of the year,
owned.
Right, you would be like, look, the Eagles are going to dominate up front. New England, the way they've changed their defensive front and really taken a guy Lawrence Guy, Ricky Jean-Francois, Malcolm Brown, those guys are pretty stout in the middle against the run. They don't get after the passer very well. Trey Flowers on the edge.
No, they do not.
And then James Harrison.
Harrison's been huge.
On the edge as well. We saw against Tennessee, he was able to beat a block and grab Derrick Henry by one hand and throw him down. So they actually do have this defensive front of solid run defenders, but the matchup I said in there is a Landon Roberts. They've done a lot where they kind of leave Roberts on an island and let him run sideline to sideline, which is going to be a challenge if Ajayi and Blunt get to the second level, because they're so difficult to tackle.
That's the thing, is that I think the overall matchup is that they need to win on the ground. But I don't think it necessarily needs to be the offensive line that's winning, because these running backs in Philadelphia are among the league's best at generating yards after contact. So both Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount averaged 3.6 yards per carry after contact this year, which is in the top 5, basically.
Yeah, both of them in the top 5.
I mean, there's a couple of guys above them, but everybody except Alvin Kamara, everybody ahead of them essentially has a relatively low number of carries. Mm-hmm. Kenyon Drake and Alvin Kamara are the two guys with significant carries, and neither of those guys tops 150. So they've been able to generate significant yards after contact. They've both been able to break tackles consistently. I don't think they need the offensive line to dominate, but they do need to be generating that yardage.
Yeah, those running backs are legitimately bigger, stronger than a Landon Roberts.
Yes.
And Landon Roberts is giving weight. That's rare in the NFL for a linebacker to be doing so to a running back, but he will be in this game.
And we're looking at probably two of the most creative run games in the NFL.
Yeah.
There's so many NFL teams that are like, all right, let's just run inside zone over and over and over again. You've got the trap game, which you wrote about again, Mike, that the Eagles run this old school trap game.
Yeah.
They'll
More
run
traps than anyone else.
power. They'll run zone.
New England and Philly, two number 1 and number 2 trap teams.
It's a copycat league, guys.
Yeah.
Copycat league. Run more traps.
You'll make the Super Bowl.
That's how you do it. With your backup quarterback sometimes, too.
And
there's a lot of good matchups in this thing.
That offensive line is also one of the arguably the best run blocking offensive line. If they had Jason Peters, it would be the best. But it is Wisniewski, Kelsey, Brooks, Lane Johnson, all in the top 10 in terms of grading at their individual positions in run blocking. So they can generate movement. They can get things done, and with those RPOs and option plays, they can get more space generated that you don't necessarily need perfect blocking up front for those running backs to run through.
I think it's one of the. I mean, it won the number one offensive line in the NFL per PFF this season, even with Vaitai at left tackle, because those other four guys are so strong. You know, there was a huge upgrade for them getting Wisniewski in the lineup and finally letting him actually play there for any extended period of time. And then those other three guys have all been Pro Bowl minimum level, All-Pro more likely players at center, right guard, and right tackle. So that is a really good offensive line, which has to help their run game, has to help Nick Foles be able to at least settle into the game, because he shouldn't be under pressure at the same kind of rate that we're saying the Eagles have to hurry Brady.
The one thing that worries me, though, about that matchup is still James Harrison against Big V at left tackle. Like, he laid waste to Cam Robinson last week. He had a move where he almost broke Cam Robinson's arm. He did a rip move, so he grabbed Cam Robinson's hand, did a rip move with his left hand, and had it to where he could have broken his arm, but Cam Robinson literally just pulled his arm away and let him run free for the sack because he didn't want to get his arm broken. It was one of the craziest pass rushing moves. But that is James Harrison, and James Harrison in the Super Bowl, you don't think he's going to come ready to play and wanting to murder somebody? Like, I think that matchup just can't go well for Philly. Is the one thing that I'm like, Philly's offense, just that matchup alone is what scares me.
James Harrison spent the offseason, bench pressing fire trucks and leg pressing all that stuff.
I mean,
probably expect him to play 500 or 600 snaps this year. He's at 126, so I'm just saying he's got 400 to 500 snaps of energy that he's going to unleash probably on 30 to 40 snaps this Sunday.
Max, yeah, no, he's definitely. I mean, even the last couple of weeks or the last couple of games the Patriots have played, his impact in the run is insane. You can see him setting an edge and just on outside zone towards his side of the field. He just halts the run, not just causes the running back to cut, but the entire offensive line basically stops movement at the point where James Harrison has set that edge, and the whole run has to back up and head in the other direction. There aren't too many players in the NFL that can do that.
And the issue for the Eagles, if it's not James Harrison that Big V is going to be blocking, it's going to be they're probably the best defensive lineman on the Patriots. It's going to be Trey Flowers. They're going to have to block who. Flowers led the NFL in hits this year. Big V led the NFL in hits given up, which seems like it's probably going to end up in Nick Foles on the ground a few times.
Flowers has been really unbelievable in the 2 playoff games. He's got 6 hurries in each of those games, a batted pass, an outstanding run defense as well. So Flowers, he's been the Patriots' best defensive player in the playoffs, one of their best all season, and absolutely he'll be a big factor against Vaitai.
The thing about that, though, is that it is really just one weak link. And we've said before in the past that if you have one weak link on the offensive line, you can patch that up. There are ways of dealing with that if you're prepared to put them into the scheme, whether it's with the kind of help they've been given Cameron Fleming at right tackle, the Patriots, chips out of the backfield, tight ends chipping before releasing, all this kind of stuff. If they want to do it, you can give Vaitai a lot of help at left tackle because the other 4 guys are fine. You don't have to worry about them at all. So I think we've talked before about this Eagles coaching staff being able to scheme things up over 2 weeks. That would be one of the areas I would be focusing on if I was building this game plan.
They have to, and I think they will. I don't think Doug Peterson's a dummy here when it comes to that. So let's get into our predictions, though, and who we think, when it's all said and done, will end up taking this. So, Sam, we'll start with you. Who is going to win this game, and how do you kind of see it going down?
So I think the Eagles will be able to slow down Brady and that Patriots offense. Okay. I think they're going to keep them in and around that 21-point level. If they get them below, I think they're really in the game. The key comes down to the other side of the ball. I think the defense will hold up its end of the bargain, and then you've got the Nick Foles question. And Nick Foles may be the single most high-variance quarterback in the entire NFL right now. He could land anywhere on the spectrum.
I think
he could land anywhere on the spectrum between absolute and total disaster and flawless, like he was against the Vikings. And I don't know there's any way of predicting where in that spectrum he's going to come. So I think that it's going to be a close, relatively low-scoring game, but ultimately the Patriots will win because they don't have Nick Foles at quarterback.
Steve?
Yeah, I like New England in this one because even though the Eagles have the defensive line horses to create the pressure, I don't know that they're gonna I don't think they're going to sell out and say we're going cover one man all the way through. And I think that is the way to do it. So I think there'll be passes to be made. Brady has handled pressure extremely well this year, best passer rating in the league by far. And I think that's a factor. And on the other side of the ball, no matter what Foles does, I think the longer the game goes, the more I give the Patriots defense the advantage to get the better of Nick Foles. You know, they're a defense that adjusts. They cover really well on the back end. I don't think he'll have the same type of windows that he's had these last couple weeks. As good as Minnesota was, I don't think they'll have the same type of windows to throw to. So I like New England in this one.
I picked the Eagles in this one. I don't feel great about it. Obviously, picking against Brady in the Super Bowl has probably not worked out well for you most of the time.
There's also that factor, too.
That Brady factor is not. I don't love it. The Brady and Belichick, they are incredibly good at game planning. And I just think, though, one, I think their defensive line is very well equipped to go up against that offensive line. I think they will win that matchup in terms of pressuring Brady consistently. And then we did our well, actually, and how the Eagles secondary has been a completely different animal since Ronald Darby got back in the lineup. That is actually a good secondary that can, in my opinion, keep up with the Patriots wide receivers, can match up well enough. So I think they slow down the Patriots offense, similar to what we saw from Jacksonville a week ago. I don't think they completely shut it down, but slow them down. And then Nick Foles, to me, is an idiot savant at this point with what he's doing. There's no explanation for it, but now back-to-back games of efficient quarterbacking, last week elite quarterbacking, I just think he shows up and does it again. I don't really have an explanation for it. Like I said, it doesn't make any sense, but I think he does.
I wouldn't be surprised by it. It's not a slam dunk.
Yeah, it's like if you look on paper, like this is probably the worst defense he's faced in the playoffs so far.
I honestly think
that's the weird part about the Patriots defense. On paper, everything is bad, and it's not just us. There are other sources that evaluate defenses that are like, man, this Patriots defense makes zero sense when you compare how well they play for play versus how many points they give up, which was fifth best in the NFL. Those two should never match up. I
honestly think, I agree with Mike, I think that this game basically does boil down to what Nick Foles you're going to get. And not just a case of good or bad, but where in that spectrum he lands. Because I agree, I think we're more or less aligned that the Eagles will be able to slow down Brady and the Patriots offense. I think everything else matches up about right, and you're basically down to, are you going to get good Nick Foles, who's able to exploit anything in front of him like he was against the Vikings and just destroy that defense? Are you going to get bad Nick Foles who can't get anything done and you need the game to be under 10 points for anything to come true? Or is he going to be somewhere in the middle and you end up with this nail-biter that goes down to the wire? I honestly think that Nick Foles is the single most important player in this game because of that.
Who makes the crazy, ridiculous catch against New England? We're looking at from David Tyree to Mario Manningham to Jermaine Kearse to Julio Jones last year. Who makes that one this year for Philly?
That's a good question.
Is it Jeffrey?
It's not going to be.
Tight window.
I don't see it being Torrey Smith, to
be
honest.
It's got to be a surprise guy.
Aguilar.
Torrey Smith.
It's got to be Aguilar.
Yeah.
Aguilar, okay. Aguilar makes the craziest contested catch.
Aguilar makes some sort of juggling craziness down the middle of the field against a trailing Eric Rowe.
I'll say Trey Burton.
Ooh, Trey Burton.
That's
not a bad
call. Makes the crazy catch.
All right, well, if it's New England Super Bowl, so we know it's going to be close, know it's going to be a fun one. Hope you guys enjoy it Sunday. We'll be back reviewing the game Monday with maybe unveiling the PFF top 101 as well. Have a good one.